Hello and welcome to the Omnex webinar Implementing and Testing Cybersecurity and IATF 16949 requirement. During this webinar, if you have any questions, enter them in your questions dialog box and the presenter will get to them at the end of the presentation. The presenter today is Chad Keimel, Omnex CTO. We're still waiting for some key customers to join, so we'll be starting the webinar in about 3 minutes. Till that time, there will be no sound. Again, we will be starting this webinar in about 3 minutes. Hello and welcome to the Omnex webinar Implementing and Testing Cybersecurity, an IATF 16949 requirement. Today's presentation is being conducted by Omnex CTO Chad Keimel. Chad Keimel is the CTO and founder of Omnex, an international consulting and training organization headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Over the course of Chad's successful career, he has served on the Malcolm Baldrige Board of Examiners and has received numerous quality achievement awards, including the Quality Professional of the Year Award from the American Society for Quality Automotive Division. Chad has co-developed and teaches Omnex's ISO 27001 internal and lead auditor courses for information security management systems. He is also the subject matter expert for IATF 16949 for Omnex. During this presentation, if you have any questions for Chad, please enter them in your questions dialog box and Chad will get to them at the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees after the webinar. We will send you an email with how to access the webinar. So there's no need to contact us. Just wait for us to contact you or visit omnex.com. It will be posted there. All right, Chad, you can take it away.
Miles, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the Implementing and Testing Cybersecurity. And if you didn't know, it is a IATF 16949 requirement now. I'll share that with you as we go through this webinar. Surely, because it's new and it's effective starting this month, it will be a topic of your your internal, third party, surveillance audit a little later this year. Okay, let's go right to the agenda. Hang on 1 second. There it is. So, folks, I imagine many of you have attended our webinars before, but Omnex is a organization founded in 1985. We work with many management systems, but we also work with Lean Six Sigma and other performance enhancement. Our goal, even though we implement management systems, is always best in class. All right. So we're headquartered here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and very global. I'll just go by these other slides fast. We also have software. We have a sister company, Omnex Systems, that has 3 suites: a management system suite, a supplier quality suite, and APQP solution. All right, here's a picture of our global offices. So you can see that we're very global. We're able to support companies like Magna and Lear globally. All right, let's get right to it, to the agenda. As I go through the agenda, Miles is going to ask you a question so I get an idea, who has attended the last webinar and who hasn't. So I'm going to start with the IATF 16949 requirements for cybersecurity testing and contingency plans. I want you to know that indeed it is something that the IATF requires, and then we'll go on to what it entails. I'll cover both ad hoc meaning how to implement that without a management system, and then the majority of this, maybe over half, is about implementing the requirements of the sanction interpretation into a management system. All right, so we'll say what is information security, why ISO 27001 is so easy to integrate, that's the high level structure, importance of context, interested parties, scope, and process approach. When you look at cybersecurity and information security, so information security is broader than cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is included in information security. You'll find out what is a CIA of information security. So this idea of context, interested parties, scope, and process approach is important when we talk about 27001. Then we'll get right to what we call the risk treatments and controls. And part of how we identify all the risks are by doing the testing. And then we'll talk to you about implementation steps and the summary. All right, so let me take a quick look at the poll. Okay, so as you can see here, we actually have a whole list of upcoming webinars. We regularly do them. It's a as you can see, you will see from this webinar, there's a lot of content we provide in our webinars, and very leading edge of our research we present in the Omnex webinars. All right, let's start with the IATF 16949 requirement. Of course, the topic of this IATF 16949 requirement is contingency planning and cybersecurity. So back in October, when all these the requirements came out, and they said it's for January, this was one of the FAQs that came out. What is meant by the term cyber attack? If you don't recall, cyber attack was added to contingency planning some months ago, but really it was just a term without any explanation. And I'm just not going to read everything here. So they said cyber attack is often a deliberate exploitation of weaknesses in the security of computer systems on networks to gain access to data, dot, dot, dot. And then they went on to say, most of us might think, well, management system, oh, we'll focus completely on technology. Not so. Cyber attacks and cyber crimes are not just technology, but it could even just be how weak a password is, how often people change their passwords, or what you call a phishing email that anybody in a company could answer, by which they'll break into our email system and then compromise the whole system. And or phone calls announcing fake emergencies, um, looking at typed passwords, infecting websites with malware, putting an innocent thumb drive on your desk or somewhere inside the company, and you take that and see what is this? I don't recall this, and putting a virus in your system. While I'm saying this, let me just say I have Mr. Anthony John, who is who heads Omnex Systems, joining me for this webinar. Hello, Anthony. How are you?
Hello, Chad. Thank you. Thank you for having me in this webinar, and hello to all the participants here.
So I'll be asking him questions now and then, and we'll try to make it a dialogue, Anthony. So we give the greatest value for those of those listening in. And so the idea is you need to have both technology and you need to have people inside the organization have a good understanding of how their system could be compromised so they don't take any chances. Let me also just mention here, I just saw the news, I don't know if you did, the US government has charged the Chinese military, 4 people in the Chinese military, for breaking into one of the biggest hacks for insurance company, Equifax. I forget now how many millions of personal information was stolen, but I shared that information last year just about how compromised things are in the USA. All right. Now that we know what a cyber attack is, and we also know that a cyber attack could be both external and internal, let's go look at the sanction interpretation. So this is what they added in the sanction interpretation. They said cyber attacks on information technology systems. Really is much more than that. Let's take a look at the whole standard 6123 for contingency planning, and you see, sorry, I meant to say this was the old edit. This is now first mentioned in 2017 without explaining cyber attacks very much, and this is now what they've added into the contingency planning. I especially wanted to show you this entire requirement because I wanted to make sure it's in the context, you understand it in the context of contingency planning. So identifying all the threats are not enough. You do need to come up with the risk mitigation plans that go with it. So looking at this, you can see cybersecurity testing may include a simulation of a cyber attack. We need to do regular monitoring of specific threats, identification of dependencies, prioritization of vulnerabilities. The testing needs to be appropriate to the risk, And the whole goal here, of course, is the customer is concerned this kind of a cyber attack could immobilize the supplier, thus affecting issues. So don't forget, that's the whole goal of contingency planning, is to continue, providing product. So they didn't stop just at the IT infrastructure, of the company. They went right to the plant and they talked about cyber protection for equipment and systems supporting manufacturing. So, is that true, Anthony, that a machine on the plant floor could get infected, thus, immobilizing maybe key machinery
Oh,
or all the machinery?
absolutely, Chad. So I'll give you a case. Let's say you're walking down the driveway, you see a pen drive. The first thing what you get to do is you take it and then try to put it into the your work computer and say, hey, what's in the pen drive? And that's the start of where you could a malicious hacker could upload a virus into your computer that's actually connected to a PLC or a SCADA machine that's collecting data. The risk is even more higher when this is connected to an oil refinery where with a lot of controls. Some of these older systems, they don't have a platform for an antivirus or a malware check, so easily just a simple naive user just putting in a pen drive into one of those computers could just bring down the whole refinery or even the plant floor.
So I'll just say this. I guess, if our listeners didn't know, the most famous hack, of course, is the U.S. government hacking into the centrifuge, uranium centrifuge process of Iran, and um, what they did is they put a virus in that made the centrifuge go faster and faster and faster, so it disintegrated. So, very much, folks, the equipment also needs to have cyber protection. You know, inside the plant, if it's not connected, it might be training, and ensuring people just don't put things into the computer might be a control. But if it's connected to some sort of a, internet and external system, of course, all the same issues of the enterprise.
Absolutely. Like IoT devices or any devices that you're connecting today and you're leaving data to go to a cloud system, those are all potential entry points to your equipment.
All right. So if you see what we just talked about, there's three different types of testing that we need to do. One is we sort of categorizing it, and I want to help you, get you enough information so you're able to, talk in a convincing way to people who have to provide you services. One is enterprise IT security. Second is IoT security. And third is industrial security. So, well, let's explain all of this, and I'm going to invite Anthony to tell a little bit more. In these three tests, we're not, we're looking just at the infrastructure and the machines more than the people, and we'll talk about the people controls in a second.
Absolutely. So we covered, the enterprise IT security, the IoT in a greater detail in the last webinar. So we'll encourage you to take a look at the last webinar. Enterprise IT security, as you all know, it's been there since 2006, and it's been more established. Initial adoption has been around the IT services providers, and then slowly all the manufacturing facilities have some control on enterprise IT security. The most common tools that you use around these IT security are usually doing a vulnerability test. So they call it VAP, vulnerability test, or also pen test or penetration testing, just to see how how vulnerable your enterprises are. So we use ethical hackers to understand, and of course with working with the internal IT team, trying to see where are your weak and vulnerable points, and what are the entry points for your potential hackers.
So the controls, Anthony, we'll talk about controls when we get to both the ISO 27000 and we'll talk about NIST standards. Our recommendation is companies implement both.
Sure.
And so let's go on. And enterprise IT security, the VAP and the PEN.
Correct.
Okay, penetration.
So in the enterprise IT security umbrella, we cover the network, your computers, your laptops, your mobile devices, your cloud, and so on. When it comes to IoT, now our focus is shifted towards equipments, the sensors that you have on these equipments. The sensors usually send data to gateways or routers, where some small firmware or software are embedded part of these for rules analysis. This is a focus in terms of an IoT security, looking at how your IoT devices could be made secure. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, also IoT by itself does not come with a built-in transport layer or network as part of the network topology. So they do not have built-in security in these devices. So managing the IoT security is very, very critical for companies. The third aspect of it is in terms of industrial security. Now, some of your missions could be connected. If you have older equipments, they are all, so we call them as operational technology infrastructure. So these equipments are generating data. Now they could be connected or they are offline devices. Offline devices, you need physical security, just ensuring that the computers that the equipment is connected to, or the equipment itself, patch management, you're not using any thumb drive or any CD, and trying to install things. But connected devices, especially, have more challenges. These assets, they send data, and these points are sent to a cloud-based system. The deployment of patches on your cloud and upgrades to your equipments through a cloud-based platform are vulnerable vulnerable entry points for a potential hacker to attack.
So some of the things I've been doing, Omnex has been doing, is of course, trying to be a support to organizations to do this. We've been working hand in glove with our software organization to set up penetration testing. And of course, the testing by itself is not enough. I'm not sure if I'm getting ahead. There you go. So cybersecurity testing, is this enough? Right? So that's why I wanted to make sure you understand that testing is part of an overall requirement called contingency planning. So once you identify the vulnerabilities and the dependencies, and you have to prioritize them, and then you identify, what kind of risk mitigation you have to do, and then you have to build it into your contingency plan. Now, very differently from most other things, the cybersecurity hackers are getting clever, more and more clever. So they're continually adding, you know, um, other things that they have to do. So you have to be tied in either to a company that is monitoring these updates, belong to associations, and there are several that exchange information inside the automotive industry, and you'll have to repeat this testing just to make sure if there's any new vulnerabilities that you want to add on.
So, just to add to that, Chad, there's about the most another popular attack is also ransomware attack. and they're saying that attack has grown over 36% since the 2017. It's continuing to grow, where people are attacking them, asking for a ransom, and these ransomware actually are connected to a Bitcoin, so you cannot trace the money also.
So I'll tell you this, many of the organizations on this phone call today, I would say 1/3 to 1/2 of you probably have had some sort of ransomware attack. You probably don't know because it is handled at the highest level of the organization. We do because we are privy to what's, when that happens inside companies. So, in fact, so what we learned is to, defend yourself against these vulnerabilities and risks. So the step one is identifying risks. I'll just point out here. This is a slide actually from ISO 27001. It's they look at the risks in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. Is data getting stolen, or are they manipulating the data that loses integrity, or are they shutting down the machine, not making it available? For example, the availability of data. So you identify the risks, you have to analyze the risks, and then evaluate them for risk treatment. This is only in one part of the risk treatment part of the standard. The second part of the standard is all about controls. In fact, there's over 100 different controls you have to either, implement and or explain why you don't have to implement. We'll get to that. So similar to FMEAs and control plans, on one hand, you have the risks in the FMEAs. On the other hand, you have the controls in terms of controlling it. In fact, you can use a TARA framework for looking at the threats, and then you can actually go into a control plan. Omnex likes to use tools that we already know when we try to come up with the risks. I want to say one more thing. When we announced this webinar, we had discussed that that both the quality manager and the IT manager attend, right? This is a combination between, management system and the IT controls. Any which way you look at it, the risk mitigation is going to involve systems and how processes behave. All right. So what we'll do now is segue into the idea of an information security management system, or what we call the ISMS. Now, shame on me, if I went back to the FAQ, in fact, let me go to the slide on the FAQ in my hard copy, and let me just read to you what it says about ISO 27001. It's not very much, but they do encourage companies to look at the cyber attack, as they say it. All right, here it is. So they say details regarding information technology security techniques is available through ISO IEC 27001. So we tell companies, do you want to just take an ad hoc measure and do this in an ad hoc manner, meaning isolated manner, and then you repeat it and you do it later, and you repeat the testing and you do it later, or do you want to build it into the information management system? And we believe it is, of course, put it into an information management system. So here is the information security with its confidentiality, availability, and integrity. Confidentiality means that the information is not made available or disclosed to unauthorized individuals, entities, or processes. Integrity means accuracy and completeness, to make sure somebody hasn't come in and purposely injected some wrong data. For example, if your furnace is supposed to operate from XY degree to XX degrees, you could hack into that sensor and just jack up the temperature till it's so. Third is availability, the property of information being accessible and usable on demand by an authorized entity. All right. So we, as they say, the CIA of information security. So this 27,000 family, it goes from, it's got 8 parts with a 00 all the way to 07. Now, when we developed our internal auditor and lead auditor courses, we put in, we added in all the parts of the standard that we thought implementers and auditors needed to share. And of course, also our strength when we teach something like this or implement something like this is our understanding of automotive management systems and automotive companies. So really, in the end of the day, 27,001 is fairly straightforward to implement because it is a management system and it has to follow what is called a high level structure. Okay. And what is also called, what is the word I'm looking for? It's a requirement is the 27,000. Sorry. So let's look at 27,001 and then we'll go look at 27,000. 27,001, which is the requirements or where the shalls, the mandatory requirements of the standards are being held. When you put an information system management, information security management system in place, where you're putting in policies, procedures, guidelines, forms, checklists, and of course, it's managed similar to your IATF 16949 or ISO 14001 management system. So what do we say? It's a systematic approach for establishing, implementing, operating, monitoring, reviewing, maintaining, and improving an organization's information security. Why? To help you achieve your business objectives. All right. And as all management systems, most importantly, it's based on a risk-based thinking and it starts with a risk assessment. And folks, this risk assessment cannot be done just simply by a cross-functional team to identify the vulnerabilities and the issues of technology. You have to use software tools and testers who can go in and challenge your system and identify vulnerabilities. So let me ask you, what do the tools do versus what do the ethical hackers find when we do some testing like this? Why should you have ethical hackers on top of the tools? Can the tools identify everything?
So the yes and no. So when you do use some of these tools, it is recommended that as best practice that the company themselves do some basic vulnerability assessment within the company. But even though you have these, what happens is many of those assets are not identified or are kept open, and a tool is is not designed to hack in different ways. They can give you a list of vulnerabilities, but with ethical hackers, what they are able to do, they use their human quotient of intelligence to find different avenues to break in. So
So they will find things that the
that
software tool was not
was
able to
not
find.
able to find. And that's what gets updated into as part of the user community, the ethical hacking community, that goes back into the tools and they improve the tool.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. So here's ISO 27000. So this is actually a requirement. It's what we call normative. It's a normative reference in ISO 27000, which means as you read 27001, when something is defined in 27001, it follows really the vocabulary that's in ISO 27000. All right, not ISO 9000, as we have to do in IATF 16949? Of course, IATF 16949 has definitions in its body, and then you go to ISO 9000 for definitions that's not in IATF. Here in Information Security Management Systems, it's there in the 27000. Now, if I didn't make clear, let me say it again. Information Security Management Systems includes cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is one part of it. All right. Maybe I've already answered this. Maybe I have not. So many folks, many people who implement this are implementing it as though 27001 is a IT department, just like they thought IATF 16949 is a for the quality department. People are looking at ISO 27001 as a practice for the IT department. Yep, you guys go implement it. So, at the end of the day, it's not a silo process. It is really, if you want to maintain information security, it is really has to be thought of as a company-wide practice. And I think we gave you many examples about that. Okay. Yes, you need technology, but you need technology and also all different types of controls. We'll make this point with the example of context. And are you working from home? Are you working as you travel? What does that have to do with information security? Well, let's find out. So, how does this 27001 fit in with other standards? There is a 27032, a guidance standard. It's only guidance for cybersecurity. So 27001 very much is a process-based, risk-based standard, and integrates very nicely with the IATF 16949 management system. All right. Of course, for us in the automotive industry, you need to be practicing IATF 16949. Many of you do VDA 6.3. All of us do ISO 14001. And also we're getting 45001. So all of these need to be integrated, and so does ISO 27001. So what helps this integration take place? Really, it is something called a high-level structure. All of these standards that I talked to you about, IATF 16949, ISO 14001, 45001, which is health and safety, ISO 14001 is environmental, and 27001 have the same structure. Okay? Common terms, common core definitions have to be identical by the ISO Annex SL. So it really lends itself to integration. Folks, let me pause here for a second or 2 minutes to see if there are questions you'd like to ask. Okay? And by the way, the poll said that 70% of the people are new. Always surprises me that we don't get more consistency in the attendees. So let me have you guys look at the questions here. So I'm already seeing questions about whether you'll get a copy of this. Yes, we will make available a copy of this presentation. Please do check in with us. Let me wait for 30 more seconds to see what kind of questions you have. Folks, are you guys all listening carefully? Am I so clear you have no questions? Okay, there you go. There's a couple of questions there. All right, let us go on. So try to understand, if you're familiar with the IATF 16949 or ISO 9001, in the high level structure, we have context, interested parties, scope, and the process approach. So let's try to talk a little bit about these important areas. For example, when you look at, especially ISO 27001, you have to understand the external, internal issues and the context that goes with it. Let's discuss this, Anthony. Let's talk a little bit about company A versus company B.
Mhm.
Let's go right down the line here. Here we have a headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. A company B, it's a real company. They actually have their headquarters in they're like business divisions and headquarters in multiple different locations. Stop me when you think there's a salient context issue.
Sure.
Okay? Maybe we're not so concerned that they have headquarters, everywhere. Maybe we're concerned about the IT infrastructure. Am I
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
The more distributed they are, the more you want them to be connected and having more homogeneous systems in place. So the more diverse these sites are, the chances of
The number
vulnerability
about the vulnerabilities, increase
increases.
in size greatly,
Yes.
depending on what asset that they have
Correct.
outside, and especially if that asset is exposed in a country where there's high risk.
Right.
Okay. Now, design in headquarters in company A, where design in B, so they do design in China, they do software in India, they do testing in Mexico, let's imagine. Okay. So hardware and software, including many suppliers. Okay. So why is design important? Because it's IP, right? Who has got the greater risk?
Um, the greater risks are again, the bigger the network, the wider your customer base and your supply base, the risk is much higher. Um, and you also have like for example, employees working from office versus home. That's a very big differentiator in the risk. It's not when you're talking about employees working from the office, the challenges or risks are about phishing attacks and mail attacks and things like that, or even using a wrong USB. When you're working from home, you may be using a home computer or connecting through a VPN, or maybe you're traveling and you're connecting through a Wi-Fi. All that is a strong candidate for a vulnerability.
So what you're saying is, if I'm home and I have a personal computer and uh, it should not be able to connect.
It should not be directly connected. You probably have to be routed via a VPN with a high secure channel. In this one, work from home, you may be connecting from home or a hotel network through a Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi will actually expose vulnerabilities into the
So
network.
you're saying we have 5 offices in China, and I go into the computer, it's an American hotel, I use their internet. The biggest problem I have in China is my VPN gets blocked. They don't let me use my VPN. So in the end, I'm forced to use the hotel VPN, thus compromising all of Omnex.
Right. So if you look at what we have done as a system now is that you could have the Wi-Fi. You can connect to the Wi-Fi, but there's an option available in your antivirus software to enable VPN. When I say VPN, you're not connecting to the VPN, but it will make your presence not within the network of China or wherever you are. So it will spoof as if you are somewhere in Malaysia for some time and then you are traveling in India. So the IPs are actually spoofed and managed.
Uh-huh. So, folks, you can see here the controls are a combination of technology and behavior, right?
Correct.
So, very important, keep that in mind. How about interested parties? Does interested parties play a role? Folks, I'm looking at time and I'm losing time, so I'm going to keep maybe increasing the speed here. I'm only a little bit more than half done. So um, looking at this, you know, you can see here if you have regulatory requirements in the government, we highly recommend. By the way, we're going to recommend no matter that we implement NIST 800 that comes from the government. The government has been hacked. They're very concerned about, some, you know, third party hacking into their system. So, so looking at this, you can also see part of the interested parties, contractors in design and outsource design in company B, or maybe outsource software.
Right.
So it's not that you can't do that, but you really need to know what kind of controls you have in place.
Absolutely. Especially with it, working with autonomous and electric vehicles, there's so much software component that goes into the product itself. So it's not only threatening the overall infrastructure. A malware could enter both your enterprise and also your customer products as well.
Through the product design.
Exactly.
So, and actually, there are real stories here. For a moment there, I was going to invite Dr. Juan Pimentel. Many of you know him as our product cybersecurity. This is from electric vehicle, autonomous vehicle viewpoint. Juan is our instructor for the certification course on product cybersecurity. He also happens to be an industrial cybersecurity expert. And I was thinking of inviting him to this webinar, but it is already so chock full that I thought I wouldn't do it justice in terms of time. So let's look at the scope here. I think it's very important to ensure what we do and do not include in terms of not just the ISMS. Well, when we say ISMS, we need to maybe put some decisions as a company to say, will we cover travel, working from home, supplier access to our portal, customer access to our portal, other. These decisions have, large implications based on what you can or cannot control.
So I'll also add, Chad. I mean, you mentioned it as other, but like some of the popular ones that's happening now is, Boyd. That's bring your own device to work. That's another area that where threats are happening because your personal phone or your personal computer is being now used at work. You could be working from home or office, but if your emails or yours
Joining into the
laptop, yeah,
to the company internet on your phone.
yep, could do that. So patch deployments on mobile phone or cloud are also another potential areas of scope coverage, I would say.
So in case the audience didn't know, so when you're on somebody else's internet, they could just break into your computer and drop a virus in there that you may not know for a few months or even a couple of years. It'll be sort of a Trojan waiting to act up when they want. The second is if you get an email that says click here and you click there and go into a website, the same thing can happen.
Right.
So and people are thinking of more and more. And what is I don't know if you saw that. Well, this is a product cybersecurity one, so I won't bring it up. What might be
The other cool thing that's happening now is also, I mean, almost to school now, scary thing that's happening is that people are sending, you get these text messages with hyperlinks, with offers and they make it so legitimate that it is coming up from a known source. Sometimes an attacker attacks your phone and then sends a message from your phone to your contact. So the other contact does not know that it's it's not a
not a legitimate.
legitimate message. When you just have to click and they control your entire laptop or notebook or your phones.
Okay, so very scary world we live in, folks. Implementing ISO 27000, you need to follow the process approach. It's required, it's mandatory in 27001 that you follow the process approach. So what does this process approach mean? So we'll just go to, so we like to say processes, process map, process owners. All right. So Omnex recommends integrating this information security management system into the process map of the organization. Excuse me. As you all know, the process map illustrates the sequence and interaction. Processes are owned by process owners as per IATF, and process owners are the business owners of a transactional process. And IT requirements then needs to be integrated into a planning process, new product development process, supplier selection. Is there an IT security risk factor when you look at a supplier? Absolutely, folks. Absolutely. In fact, that's why you're getting these requirements as a supplier to a OEM or in change management. All of these IT requirements come in. This is just a picture, looking at the process itself, that the process has inputs, outputs, and needs to be controlled. Okay, that's what I'm going to be talking about. Controls are a key part. Let me dwell on this before I move on. There's a requirement for leadership. That leadership, of course, again, is they're the ones accountable for the information security management system. And there's a requirement that 27001 is integrated. So look at B there, the integration of the information security management system into the organization's processes. So we like to tell people integration of information security management system is not optional, it's mandatory. So here's the process map, and we try to integrate everything into the way we do things. All right, so I just need to keep going because of time. Let's talk about risk treatments and controls. This is the PlanDoCheckAct of ISO 27001. You will see here that there's 612 risk assessment. This is where all those tools for the different types of risk assessments we have to do come in. Now you should do both kinds of risk assessment. You should look at the behaviors inside the company, right from the overall context to how people behave, while people working from home. So the full perspective of the risk assessment won't be complete if we don't do both the IT tool technology and ethical hacker, and also looking at how people are working inside the company.
Correct. Like vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, and also, a physical security of, and training people. That's a big deal.
Big deal. So it's not that you're going to do it then. You're just going to identify the risks, and then you have to come up with a prioritization and analysis of the risks. Folks, the controls don't come in till you get to 8.1. Okay, so in 8.0 is what I meant. In operation, you'll see here 8.2 information security risk assessment and information security risk treatment. All right. So the controls we find in section 6, the fixes we do in section 8, just like we do in IATF. So this is then Annex A of ISO 27001. It has 114 controls broken into 14 sections, and 35 control categories. Okay. So what is the rule? The rule is you have to do all of this or equivalent. If not, you'll have to explain why you excluded something. And these requirements get added in when you look at, of course, the NIST requirements. So here is an example here of security control clause, so that the idea that is top management's role in terms of information security policy, objective alignment, integrating the activities into the business systems, and the achievement of ISMS objectives. Also, a second set of examples that what they're calling an unattended device. All right. So, what is the control here? Securing offices, rooms, and facilities, and coming up with certain rules on who can use the assets, who can't use the assets. Impersonation, the category, the idea of weak passwords. To make sure people put in stronger passwords. Number one, we need to make you know how they'll say you got to put a symbol. It's got to be this many words long. Yeah. It's got to have alpha and numeric. Loss of ID credentials, outdated software. I mean, look at this, the privilege abuse, right? So these are all different controls, and of course, there's 114 of them that need to be considered when you do 27001.
So now more and more companies are also going towards what is called as a multi-factor authentication. So it is not just only password. You need a password, then maybe a fingerprint or a retina, or even a hard drive check. So they do a multi-factor authentication.
So you can see when you go into websites now, they might even send you a text in your computer,
like
and you'll have to you'll have to put that back in, so that there are two ways of two authentications. Okay. So just to mention NIST 800, um, so depending on if you're a supplier, either NIST 853 or 800-171 will become a requirement. And you can see here the number of controls. So you may or may not know, Omnex has an integrated management system. We do QMS, EMS, OSHAs, and IT security. For Omnex, we've already followed Annex A. I'm telling our folks here, I'm not satisfied. We need to also put in all the NIST controls. All right? We better be safe than sorry. So here it is. There's a 612, makes you look at the risk, analyze the risk, evaluate the risks, and then of course the whole idea is determine the controls necessary to treat the risks, compare the controls with Annex A, and make sure none of the controls have been omitted, and look at the statement of applicability. You need to come up with what is called a statement of applicability and formulate a risk treatment plan. Of course, for us, this risk treatment plan will be in the contingency plan, because that's the requirement we're trying to satisfy also. All right, I'm just going to go right on. And this is the last section, folks, the idea of implementation. Why are you implementing? Number one, it's an IATF 16949 requirement. Also, I guarantee you this. I only say this because I see so much going on here in terms of ransom attacks, ransomware. Eventually, you will get hacked if you don't put something into place. So much more. Look at this. The stock exchange came up with guidance. So if your company is traded on the stock exchange, they said cybersecurity risks pose grave threats to investors, our capital markets, and our country. And they go on and they said companies are required to establish and maintain appropriate and effective disclosure controls and procedures that enable them to make accurate and timely disclosures of material events, including those related to cybersecurity. Okay, so suddenly it has gone right to the boardroom of our organization. So the company Omnex recommends that the company board needs to get involved and provide oversight and responsibilities to this effort. The SEC has asked for a description of how the board administers the risk oversight. All right, and ISO 27001 requires both internal and external audits, and you have to continue planning and testing your systems similar to SOX, okay? Sarbanes-Oxley. Organizations should not only be focusing on external parties, as we mentioned to you, it's also internal attacks and the availability of information. All right. So we say as a first starting point, maybe you need to get an executive overview. Okay, how do we get started? Phase 1A, conduct the discovery analysis and formulate the implementation plan working with the internal implementation leader. Okay? Same time, either in 1B or later on when you're doing the risk treatment as part of the implementation, you can do the cybersecurity testing. You can actually come up with the implementation plan where you put the cybersecurity testing as one of the implementation factors in phase 2. And then make the plan, implement the plan, make sure you put the controls where they belong into your existing process map processes. And make sure you implement this with a steering committee in a cross-functional team, similar to how you did IATF 16949. So discuss and plan the approach, conduct a discovery gap analysis, conduct your cybersecurity testing, educate the CEO, board, and top management, get buy-in, create the plan, and ... conduct third-party audits, get yourself certified, and make sure you have a management system. Folks, even if you don't want to get certified, put a system in place where you'll do testing on an ongoing basis and you'll do an internal audit to make sure your 27001 process works. So here are some strategies. The idea of integrated management systems. And I told you I don't think it's optional, it's mandatory. Omnex also integrates the planning process in what we call the business operating system, ensuring there are KPIs for the information security and the objectives for information security that are rolled into the business objectives and the company KPIs. Conducting risk-based assessments, putting controls into business processes. Very importantly, the code of conduct that you wrote for social responsibility, put in the IT code of conduct into the same code of conduct. Implement enterprise quality, and integrate all of them. And then, of course, use electronic workflows. Use software to run these systems. So last slide, folks. Put an implementation plan in from your gap discovery analysis, and that's how you get started. Folks, I have a last summary slide, and while I do that, let me pause here. I see that a lot of questions have come up. See if you have any other questions you want to ask. We will take an extra 10-15 minutes, try to answer all these questions before we close the webinar. So before I go to the last slide and summarize the webinar or the topic of cybersecurity, the IATF 16949 requirements, let me give you some time to ask more questions. So pause here. I know if I leave dead air time, even 15 seconds sometimes seems like a long time. So
I think I wanted to add a little bit from on some of those things you were talking, especially around supplier integrating supplier into the space. A lot of supplier customers have enabled supplier portals, and supplier PPAPs and other documents are actually sent. I would encourage that all these applications have a minimum data security of data at rest and data at transit. Okay, that's very essential to cover the data security. So hackers are not easily hacking your data while it's at transit and while it's actually at rest inside a database. Um, a mobile patch deployment is another key area to look at, and also uh, cloud data sharing is another area.
Okay. So with that, let us summary and key takeaways. Get senior management involved. The primary concern of senior management is to ensure long-term success of the organization. Let them also understand that it's a SEC requirement that we put controls in place, and how important this ISO 27001 is a company-wide effort. Conduct a discovery gap analysis. It's a good starting point. Develop a business case to present to your executive team. In fact, maybe you can do the gap analysis first before you do the executive overview, or vice versa if you don't have the support. Gain cross-functional support. Create a steering committee along with either the IT manager or the quality manager taking the lead. I would imagine that the IT manager wants to take the lead in this case.
More like a CTO.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who might take the
CIO,
CIO, CTO. Develop a project plan with key project milestones, and then put a system in place, even if it's a rudimentary system, and then continually improve. Folks, don't wait for the most perfect system. Put a system in place, you know, and also make sure it's not just antivirus software or the latest firewalls or locking down your laptops and web servers. It's all about people and processes, not just technology. With that, let me just cover a few more things. Want to make sure you know our upcoming webinars. Maybe I should also say Omnex offers services in just doing cybersecurity testing. So somebody just wanted to do cybersecurity testing and working with them on contingency plans, it's an offering we have. Am I right, Anthony?
Yes, that's correct. So we can offer some of those, vulnerability assessment
In all three of those areas,
in
right?
all three areas.
The hardest area we find is industrial cybersecurity, which we have a special edge on because of the experts we have. And second is, of course, doing this testing and the contingency planning as a part of a 27001 management system, integrating it into the IATF I14001. Those would be all the fortes for Omnex. All right, folks, here are some of the webinars we have, books I have written, classes that we have. So this awareness training class is a training class for basic understanding of the employees. This is not the executive overview. I should put the executive overview, or we should have put the executive overview on the slide also. You can see we have an understanding, internal auditing, and a lead auditor course. This is the IATF 16949 series. This is our Automotive Spice SOTF Agile series. Agile, as you know, it's a software practice, but we're also doing Agile at scale. Here's our Functional Safety series, a lot of different functional safety courses. This is for those of you who are required to have ASILs in your design, doing electronics. AIG, VDA, FMEA, more and more this is becoming a requirement. It's a requirement of Daimler that that you start doing AIG, VDA, FMEA. Now with that said, let us go and take the questions that we have. Pardon me, folks, as I pull up the questions. Let me start with the very top here. Some process related questions. Will this webinar be held again? This was somebody who had problems with their audio. Yes, contact us. We'll actually give you a link to this webinar so you can hear this webinar again. Or if some of you wanted to share this webinar, with others. Will we get specific information on exactly what it will take to meet the testing requirements. And how do I answer that question? I think there are a number of different vulnerability and penetration tests that can happen. There's a set number of tests, if you came to us, that we will recommend. And, but we will do it on, we will do it based on IT enterprise, IoT, and then manufacturing, manufacturing systems. Now, that's industrial. It's not exactly what we called it, and you understand there's three different areas for this testing, but you shouldn't stop there. The testing should also be behavioral and looking at your systems internally, okay? So I hope that answered it. If not, please do contact us. Maybe an SME from our side can talk to you more. Do you know if there are any customer specifics that require ISO 27001? There is no requirement for ISO 27001, just a recommendation that information security techniques are available through 27001. It's a recommendation. I have no doubt that this will become a requirement in the automotive industry. It is a key area that everybody should be concerned about, including a top management. Does Omnex have training for 27001 implementation and certification? We offer open enrollment, understanding, internal audit and lead auditor, and we do it on site. We add a UDI, understanding, documenting, integrating. But of course, we're a full service company that does everything from gap analysis to including testing. We as an automotive company have certified to IATF 16949, 14001, and OSHA's 18001. Is it possible to integrate these standards along with the ISMS? Folks, I think you may or may not know, I went by that quickly and I shouldn't have, but I wrote a book on integrated management systems where we integrated at a very minimum QMS, EMS, and OSHA's, and we have done it for hundreds of companies, but I did 5 case studies in there from a public sector semiconductor, automotive, aerospace, a public sector in Asia, IATF in Asia, and public sector in Dubai. So many different examples that were given. Yes, absolutely, you can integrate it. As I told you, even Omnex has integrated our ISO 9001. We can go IATF, 14001, 45001 health and safety, and 27001. This is IT security and social responsibility. That is what we think is best in class. You can contact us. I have done a webinar on that subject, so we will share that with you. I'm currently going through the audit. Do I need to comply with these requirements? Is there a deadline to meet? Let me just say this. Maybe you mean you're going through IATF 16949 audit? Yes. This is currently a requirement, not ISO 27001, but the requirements for cybersecurity in your contingency plan and testing is a requirement. My own feeling is it'll get written up as a minor non-conformance, with the idea that you're going to take care of it in the next audit. That's because this is in the first quarter. As time goes on, it'll become more and more different, become important. Are there different cybersecurity requirements of products versus organization? Yes, indeed. The product cybersecurity, don't confuse product cybersecurity like SAE J3061 and ISO SAE 21434. All right, as you may or may not know, we're on that writing committee. That's for product cybersecurity. ISO 27001 is for the organization and the information, scope is very different. What kind of tools do you know for risk assessment? I don't know if we want to, there are different tools available in the marketplace, and Omnex has, solidified and working with one of those vendors who provide those tools that we use. Okay. We have several manufacturing sites that each site need to be ISO 27001 certified. If you do decide to become 27001 certified, yes, indeed, each site will have to be certified, but you can do an integrated management system without certifying to 27001 if you think that's an expense. But go ahead and implement your entire system, and then maybe you want to be, certified in one site or two sites, you can. It's your decision because there is no requirement as such. It's only we are advising you to put that in place. Yes, I can tell you the tool that we suggest, but we use several different tools to when we do our vulnerability testing, along with ethical hacking, and then of course when we do the discovery gap, or we do the gap just in looking at risks, we look inside the company also for identifying the risks. Folks, that's all the questions that we had, and I hope this was helpful and um, informative to everybody attending. Thank you very much for attending the Omnex webinar on cybersecurity testing and implementing, a requirement of IATF 16949. I want to thank you for myself, Chad Keimel. Anthony John, thank you very much for joining in.
Hey everyone, thank you for being part of it.
And thank you to all of you. Folks, please do join us again, or join Omnex's training, or please do contact us for any of the services we can provide you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye now.